Welcome to The Homeless Conservative, a show about principled politics for exhausted citizens. I'm your host, Blake Fisher, and I'm a political junkie so that you don't necessarily have to be. Thanks for spending some of your valuable time with me today. We're asking the question, what exactly did we get out of this trade war with China that has been put on pause this week by Donald Trump? He's Mr. Art of the Deal, right? This is the common sort of defense of him, is that it doesn't matter what he says. It doesn't matter if it doesn't make any sense. Trust him. He's a genius at negotiating with people. He's so good at it. And I don't see what we got out of this sort of 40-something day trade war with China, where we slapped 145% tariffs on them and they retaliated with 125% tariffs on us. And now we've paused that and we've gone back to 30% on our end. They've gone to 10% on their end while they continue to negotiate for it's another 90-day pause. And my question is, what did we get out of it, right? If Donald Trump is so good at negotiating, did we get a win here with China? And I have not seen that the administration or anyone has explained what the win is here. So let's talk about that first, and then we will talk about the cutter gift of a plane for Air Force One for Donald Trump that's allegedly going to happen, although I doubt it will, but it's worth talking about because it's the perfect example of corruption and bribery. There's not been a better example of it. So let's start with China. To catch you up, in case you do not know, we've had this whole crazy trade war going on with the situation of Donald Trump promising on the campaign trail he was going to put 10 to 20% tariffs on the whole world. Myself and every economist I've ever read was like, this would be a bad idea and we shouldn't do it. But everyone sort of played it down and said, he won't really do that. He's just, take him seriously, not literally, whatever the hell that means. And sure enough, that's what we basically end up getting, sort of, even though it's just the uncertainty is still rampant because he started in with the alleged Canada and Mexico ones, the emergency he based those ones on is fentanyl crossing the border. And then he paused those a couple days later because he saw businesses coming to him and markets and stuff kind of dropping. Paused those for a second, claimed he got concessions, even though he didn't. All the things he claimed he got, he'd already gotten before he'd even taken office by both Canada and Mexico. So we got those pauses, and then he was like, well, April 2nd is going to be Liberation Day, and we'll announce all our tariffs. And essentially what we got on the announcement for April 2nd was 10% tariffs across the board for the whole world and retaliatory tariffs on countries where we have a trade deficit with them. So it didn't matter what kind of trade barriers they had set up. We're just retaliating based on if our people buy more of your stuff than your people buy of our stuff, then we're going to punish you for that. Okay. Not a good measurement by any means, but that's what he decided to do. And then, of course, paused that and said, well, we're talking to people, we're starting the conversations with people, and so we'll pause them while we're negotiating for 90 days, a 90-day pause, of course. And in the meantime, we're just going to have the 10% tariffs, but we are going to go ahead and implement ones on China because of their unfair trade practices. And we kind of bumped that back and forth. We got up to 145% tariffs. China got up to 125% tariffs, and it's sort of completely stopped trade between the two countries. There were several businesses, not several, I mean, there were probably thousands of businesses that were desperately trying to get here quickly before get their stuff here quickly before the April 2nd deadline. And so we've not seen necessarily the shortages yet and stuff because I think that people are fairly stocked up at this point. And so we saw a lot of that, and then everyone's trying to figure out what to do. And obviously, in the meantime, a lot of businesses have gone to him. The stock market tanked, the bond market tanked. There's all these things that happened, and some of that's gone up and down. It's very volatile because this changes on a whim. It's like one day he's pausing it, one day he's re-implementing it, one day he's pausing it, which is really the biggest problem with all of this. Is just the uncertainty. It makes it very hard for businesses to know what to plan for the future. So with China specifically, though, the reason I want to separate that out, and I've said this several times, is that China is a unique actor in world trade in the sense that they really are using unfair trade practices. And I'm not just talking about tariffs because I think here's the difference. Tariffs are a stupid idea because tariffs always make a country poorer. Free trade makes countries richer. And when I say richer, it's not just that their income goes up. It's that the amount of money they have to spend on items that they need and want goes down. So there's two ways that you can make people richer. You can either make them make more money and keep the cost of goods the same, or you can lower the cost of goods and keep their keep their income the same. As that gap between what they're making and what they're spending is what essentially makes people rich. Can they buy more items with their paycheck, or can they buy fewer items with their paycheck? And this is not hard to figure out. For example, like when we think of housing, if the housing market goes way up, but wages don't, then we say we've got a housing affordability crisis because those prices are rising, and which is absolutely happening, while wages are not rising at the same thing. So we're poorer in general because you can buy less house with the same income than you could, several years ago. It's the same thing with every other good. It's the same with groceries. It's the same with toys. It's the same with anything else that you buy. And world trade, think of it this way. When you look state to state, no one ever thinks of like, well, if Texas makes something and California also makes something and those two businesses are competing with each other, everyone understands that that's a good thing for the consumer because you've got two businesses that are competing for the same customers. And often price is the most important thing to people. If the Texas company makes it for cheaper than the California company and like all things are considered are the same, then most people are going to buy the cheaper one. And that will force the California company to make theirs cheaper potentially to compete. And no one has any problem with this when you look at states to states. We don't look at trade deficits between states. No, we don't even track that in any way. It would be hard to track. So for some reason, you go outside of our borders of the country and people think, Donald Trump's literal view is that these countries are ripping us off because our citizens want to buy stuff from those countries instead of from our country, for example. And I don't think he's right. I think that competition is good on a global level, just like it's good on a state to state level between businesses, even, so it's the same thing. When we get to China, though, they are truly doing unfair trade practices. And so tariffs can be a useful tool to get them to do the things that we want them to do. So I think the buckets of China, as far as how people talk about this, is there's sort of four justifications, I think, for tariffs. There's four justifications for them. I think some are more legitimate than others. So let's talk about those. The four buckets that I feel like everything drops into for China specifically. The first one is national security. We use that all over the place, but we specifically use it with people like China, Iran, Russia, North Korea. We use this as an excuse to, for Russia, we essentially have sanctions and embargoes. Like it's not even like a tariff situation. We're actually saying you cannot import stuff from them because of their bad behavior. And it's a tool that we can use, whether it's embargoes or tariffs or any other kind of thing where we're saying we're going to restrict trade because we don't like the behavior you're doing. And in some certain ways, maybe that's because they're communist and this is like the Soviet Union. Maybe that's China. Maybe it's Russia as being a bad actor with invading Ukraine. You can pick anything, but specifically when it comes to national security, what people are saying, and I think this is totally valid, is we don't want the parts that go into our F-16s coming from China. And we don't want stuff, any sort of military thing coming from China. That makes sense to me. And it's not just military stuff. We realized we have a national security problem with things like pharmaceuticals, for example. A lot of the precursors that are used to make pharmaceuticals come from China. And when you import everything solely from a country that's sort of your geopolitical enemy, medicines, for example, or personal protection equipment, which we found out during COVID, that basically all of our masks and the stuff that we use in hospitals is made in China. And if either you have a worldwide pandemic that stops that manufacturing process, or China just decides, hey, we could just cut them off if we want to, that's a bad thing for national security. So it's not just about military stuff. It's about if this country, if we're solely depending on one country that's sort of potentially an enemy, and even if they're not potentially an enemy, when you've got all of your eggs in one bucket, is that the right bucket? I don't know what that saying is, but the point is that country kind of has you on a leash of some sort because they can cut that off and then you're kind of screwed. Like we need that personal protection equipment. We need the electronics, for example, components that we're building in China and some places. And so there are some situations where you go, we need to diversify that. And so for national security reasons, we may need to put a tariff on things so that we encourage that to happen here in the United States, or we encourage people to buy it from other countries. So national security is one reason for China that I think is totally valid because they are a geopolitical enemy of ours. Okay. even though economically we are very, very entangled. Okay. The second one is the unfair trade practices, which I think is totally fair to take China on because they do not play fair. And I'm not talking about just tariffs. I'm talking about they don't play fair with intellectual property. They do not play fair with the way they dump products into countries to try to undercut manufacturing in those countries. So for example, with steel, they will dump steel into a place like Japan, for example, or into markets that Japan sells to. And when I say dump, what they're really doing is they are subsidizing the selling at below cost of that steel. So that when an industry says, well, the steel from China is cheaper than the steel from Japan, and what they're trying to do is undercut them to where they run those people out of business, and then eventually they can be the sole supplier of steel because then they can raise their prices and then they don't have competition. So there's truly unfair. They're stealing our intellectual property, and so you send something to China for manufacturing, they might manufacture their own thing and sell it themselves, and they're just literally stealing people's stuff. This goes from everything from sneakers to electronics to look at Temu. Okay, that's the perfect example of Temu, Alibaba. Any of these kind of things are basically sometimes they're the exact same thing, and they're literally stealing our companies, our American companies' intellectual property. And so we're spending all the money and we're hiring the people and the people to design this stuff, and then China's just stealing it and making a profit. So those are unfair trade practices beyond just the normal restrictionist stuff that you'd see with tariffs or embargoes and stuff. So that's the second thing. The third reason that I've heard, that China specifically we should have tariffs on, and I think there are some justifications for in some degrees, is protecting U.S. manufacturing. Now, this one is less of a thing that I like. The national security, unfair trade practices, totally fair. Protecting U.S. manufacturing that's what all these people are doing with tariffs. They're trying to protect some industry in their thing. And I think just because someone else is using tariffs, I think it makes their country poorer. It doesn't mean we should also do the same thing. But that is a reason that I hear a lot from the MAGA side of, well, we need to stop shipping these jobs out to China. We need those jobs to be here. So that's the kind of third thing. I think that's less legitimate though. Although throughout history, and Democrats still certainly believe this, and now Donald Trump and Republicans believe this, is that how you bring those jobs back is through tariffs. Okay. So I'm bringing that up because in a second we'll talk about why it didn't work. The fourth one is sort of the reasoning behind all of the tariffs and not just the China stuff was they were like, the other reason I've heard is, okay, we got to leverage this. This is just a negotiation tactic. So we are going to say, we're going to put high tariffs on everyone so that we bring them to the negotiation table. And then we're going to end up in a place where everyone lowers their trade barriers and we end up with freer trade. It's interesting to me that I hear both of those arguments from not just like MAGA people and supporters, but I hear both of those last two arguments from the administration itself. They ask questions that you're hearing two different kind of stories, depending if you hear from Peter Navarro or if you hear from like Scott Bessent. Those two things can't really coexist. We're either trying to protect U.S. manufacturing or we're leveraging toward free trade. You can't really do both of those things at the same time. And so it's interesting to me that both of those are reasons for this trade war. And like I said, I'm talking specifically about China mostly today because the rest of it it's still going on. I think it's still a bad idea, but the China stuff got paused this week. So those two things can't happen at the same time. So here's my question. What did we get out of this last 40 something days out of putting the 145% tariffs on China and then putting 125% tariffs on us when we end up at a higher tariff rate than we had before and there's still the uncertainty? Like what, if Donald Trump is such a good negotiator, what did we get out of this? And I know the answer that a MAGA person would say. They'd be like, well, it hasn't happened yet. And so we don't know yet. But this is what he's doing is he's maximizing the punishment. And so that when they dial it back, it's really where he wants it to be, which is certainly a negotiating tactic. You can say, hey, here's where I want to make, you want a raise, you want a $10,000 raise. You think your boss is only going to want to give you 5. You start at 15, so you end up at 10, and that's what you really wanted. That's normal, right? But my question is, he implemented the 145% tariffs. And then I would think that you'd want to get a concession from China of some sort. But so far, all we know is that both sides have agreed to continue to negotiate. And so they're pausing it for 90 days because Scott Bessent says, we don't want to decouple from China. We don't want to not import from China. So to me, that is immediately, now the excuse is like, well, they're clearly, this is not about bringing back manufacturing to the United States. Because if it was about bringing back manufacturing to the United States and tariffs are just good policy, then why pull them back, right? And we didn't get any sort of concession. It's not like no one spun up a factory in the last 40 days in the United States for any of this stuff. And so I don't really see how that happened. Like, what did we get there? And to me, all we've gotten out of this is a guaranteed price increase on things that come from China and really the whole rest of the world. Because remember, there's 10% tariffs across the board right now, which may still go up on those countries after the 90-day pause. And with China, we're in the same situation. 30% tariffs on everything that comes from China is going to increase the price of everything that comes from China. And so we will still see price increases. They won't be as drastic as they were, because obviously 30% is a lot lower than 145%, but 30% is still an insane tariff level. And these are the highest tariffs level. Even now, during the pauses, these are the highest tariffs we've had since the 1930s. And again, just to remind you what happened after the tariffs of the 1930s, the Smoot-Hawley Act, essentially, it's not the only reason for the Great Depression. The Great Depression was already sort of in motion, but certainly extended it. It certainly made it a worldwide depression. Everyone was being isolationist. Everyone was being protectionist. It was not a good turnout of the Great Depression, right? We'd like to avoid that. But so our tariffs right now are at the highest import tariffs since the 1930s. So my question is, A, what is the rationale? The rationale makes no sense, because if the rationale is national security, if that's the thing, what did we get? What was the concession we got from China that increases our national security? It's still 30% tariffs across the board. We didn't raise. It's not higher on specific items. It's not. There are specific ones on, I think, on steel and stuff. But so did we get a national security win here? I have not seen one. Okay. Did we get a concession on their unfair trade practices? A little bit, in a sense. One thing they did was they didn't just apply 125% tariffs on everything. They said, we're not going to export any rare earth materials to you all, which we need for a lot of things, specifically planes and things. Allegedly, we have enough in reserves that we would be okay. We use very little of these things, and so we weren't going to be in a completely dire situation if they actually cut off that. But that's sort of that situation I talked about with national security. In some ways, they said, okay, well, we'll release that thing. But again, it's not permanent. There's nothing in writing. There's no trade deal between these two countries. This is all just Donald Trump and the White House administration saying, we're pausing it, we're unpausing it. So none of this is permanent. So I don't feel like we've gotten any concessions on unfair trade practices. As far as I know, we haven't gotten any concessions on fentanyl. That's where all the precursors come from, the fentanyl. It gets sent to Mexico and built by cartels, or I guess made by cartels. All that comes from China. And so I don't think we've got any concessions on that. Donald Trump will not say what the concessions are, what the negotiations were, just that we don't want to decouple. Okay. So doesn't seem to be solving any of the unfair trade practices. Is it protecting manufacturing? Again, I don't see any way that we have protected manufacturing in this regard. Has anything moved to the United States? No. If we lower the tariffs, you would think that entire reasoning would go away entirely, which I'm okay with, by the way. Just to be clear, I think that's a terrible way. I don't think protectionism works. I think it's stupid. I think it's foolish to protect small industries at the expense of everyone else in the country. It doesn't work very well. It makes us all poor. But even if you believe that, what did we get? What concession did we get that protects U.S. manufacturing? And if this is all going towards free trade, maybe that's where we're going. I mean, yes, certainly 30% is lower than 145%, but it's still pretty high. And it's nowhere near free trade at that point. And so I don't really see how we got any of those things. And the rationale now would be, well, this is genius because he started at 145 and now we're down to 30, and that's really where he wants to be. Then why are we still negotiating? And why is this not in writing? And what is the purpose? Again, no one can explain this, okay? I'm speculating at this point. What do I think really happened here? I think that enough people got in Donald Trump's ear, business owners, especially big businesses, Apple, these like gigantic American companies. And allegedly, this was a story in, I can't remember where it was. I'll put it in the show notes if I can find it. I read last night about allegedly part of the reasoning was Susie Weiss, his chief of staff, got in his ear and said, this is actually going to hurt, like showed him data that this is going to hurt your crowd the most. Because some of these countries are retaliating with tariffs that are going to specifically target farmers and industries that there was a map in New York Times I put up a few weeks ago showing how most of the trade war stuff would hurt red states specifically. Just those industries of manufacturing and things like that are specifically just happen to be in more red states, and a lot of the blue states have more of the service stuff that has not been as affected by this stuff yet. So apparently someone got in his ear and said, hey, this is going to hurt your people the most. And you have, and not to mention the business leaders that are coming to him saying like, this is going to be disastrous for us. We can't possibly spin up manufacturing that fast. Someone convinced him that this wasn't work. So to me, that's an admission that tariffs don't work, because we've been hearing, and I've been posting these clips all the time, Donald Trump saying, it's going to be there's going to be some pain, but it'll be worth it in the end. To me, if you dial back that pain already without getting any sort of concession from anyone, it proves that pain is not worth it in the end. And maybe they're not so sure about what the end game is. So I think it's an admission that tariffs don't work, frankly. Even though he thinks trade is bad still, I think when he sees the stock market go down, when he sees bond market get shaky, when he sees the dollar get a little shaky, when he sees foreign investments not happening in the United States, when he sees businesses come to him, when he sees that red states might be hurt by it, his voter base is going to be hurt by this the most, especially the working class. It's not just the industries, it's the actual just voters and the citizens inside of those states that are poor or middle class. A 30% price increase on, a 10 to 30% price increase on everything that we import will hurt you if you make less money than if you're a billionaire. Donald Trump and his friends, they're all billionaires or millionaires, they are not going to be hurt if the price of avocados goes up by 25%, or if even 145% on some stuff. They don't need those Chinese imports. Maybe they're already buying the really more expensive boutique version that America makes, and they're just not as affected. If you make $1 million a year, a 10 to 30% price increase on your groceries you will not even notice it. But if you make $40,000 a year, you are absolutely going to notice it, and you're going to have to make cuts somewhere. And those are the people that voted for Donald Trump in 2024. The people that he swung specifically, that voted for Biden probably in 2020 and then voted for him in 2024, demographically, they are not elite. They are not college educated. They're not in what we'd call like upper middle class or the upper class. They're solidly in the lower to middle class, just demographically when we look at exit polls and things like that. So someone convinced him. But to me, you are quietly admitting that the tariffs did not work by pausing them. I think there's a weird trick here, though, is that he doesn't want to say we've got a deal and here's where the tariffs are going to be permanently. It's all these 90-day pauses. And again, I don't think this makes a huge difference, because we're going to end up with the uncertainty is still going to be there, because Donald Trump can change that tomorrow. And so businesses still can't plan. People still can't plan. The numbers out for April's numbers for consumer confidence went down again. So they've gone down like a couple months in a row. Economically wise, like we didn't have huge price increases in April. We had slight inflation. I think the target is 2.3% year over year. Their target was 2%. So it was over the year over year stuff, but it was not a huge increase from the month before. So we're not seeing the real time, like trade day. Now, to be fair, Liberation Day was April 2nd. So, and then we got a pause really quickly. And so we probably have not seen those price increases yet, because so many people backstocked stuff as quickly as they could and got it here before April 2nd. So I think May's numbers will be more indicative than April's. But like April was not a terrible report as far as inflationary. And it was a little higher than they wanted it to be, but it wasn't disastrous or anything. But I do think the consumer confidence is bad, because when consumer confidence goes way down, that means people, if they are not confident what's going to happen 6 months from now, they're going to spend less money. I'm doing this right now. I'm literally going, how much do we need that thing that we're talking about buying? And if it's not necessary right this second, I'm not buying it. It's not worth things being worse in 6 months and me having that t-shirt. And so it's already affecting, just anecdotally, that's affecting my spending. And I bet it's affecting yours. Like I said, I think if you're incredibly rich, it's probably not. I think if you're in the top 2% of the country, you are probably still spending money the same way you would. Maybe you're not building the pool in the backyard or something. Maybe really big purchases you're staying away from because you're a little uncertain. But I think it's affecting people. And so to me, the tacit admission that maybe it's not, he's claiming it's going to be worth the pain, maybe they don't really believe that. And the market's the other thing he obviously pays attention to. And it did rebound when he paused the tariffs, the Chinese tariffs on Monday. So 10-point jump, like overall 10 points, I think, which is a pretty big increase. Again, though, it's a volatility problem. I think it will continue because we've not seen the price increases yet, and I think we will. So the bigger problem with all of this, again, though, is that this is one man that is doing this trade policy. It's a centralized trade decision in the White House. There's no Congress involved. This is Donald Trump wanting to be the center of attention and needing people to come to him. So basically business have to go to him personally for tariff exemptions. The auto industry got some exemptions by lobbying. The lobby industry has exploded. So Donald Trump in 2016, of course, ran on draining the swamp. And most people think of lobbyists as part of that swamp. These people that get paid a bunch of money by industries to go lobby Congress to pass bills that benefit those industries. The upside, if there is an upside to lobbyists, is that version of lobbying meant that if, let's say, the pharmaceutical industry needed to, or the arms manufacturer, whoever, they had to go to hundreds of senators and congressmen, right, to get a bill passed that would protect their industry or would, give them some sort of leg up in some sort of way. And it's still kind of gross because it's kind of retail politics. It's basically spending money to get money. And but now those lobbyists don't have to go to Congress because Congress is doing none of this. They just have to get in Donald Trump's ear. And there are so many ways to do that now. And that specifically, access essentially means influence. And there's a few different ways that you can access Donald Trump right now. You can be in his little buddy group that he likes to impress of billionaires. That's one way you can do it. There are certain companies that he really loves to pay attention to. And like one of those, for example, has gone on Fox News, like the CEO of, dadgummit, I forgot the name of it. But this is part of the reason, it's like strategic. You can go on Fox News and you've got an ear to the president, sort of in some ways. Some of these people are paying lobbyists to do so. The point is, it's a lot easier to get access to one guy than it is to access and change the minds of hundreds of people in Congress, which is why we should not have a one-man trade policy. And when access equals influence, that's a great way to transition into the Trump plane story. So there's a lot of grifting going on in the Trump family. And the primary thing that's been going on is there is the Trump coin crypto kind of stuff. So right before he was inaugurated, he launched a Trump cryptocurrency coin, a meme coin as they call it. And this is like 2 days before he takes office. And essentially anyone can anonymously buy this coin. And he makes transaction fees on it. His family makes transaction fees on every single thing. So the estimated increased value that increased net worth the Trump family has increased in the last 3 months is $3 billion. So their net worth has increased by $3 billion. And I want to remember how, I know we throw out billions and trillions all the time when we're talking about budgets for the federal government, but $1 billion is $1,000 million. $1 million is a lot of money. 1,000 of those makes $1 billion. Then you need 3 times that just to show what Donald Trump and his family have made in the last 3 months from these sort of meme coins things and some various other things. Okay. So that was corrupt enough, in my opinion, to be like, this is kind of crazy because we don't know where this money is coming from. And it could be to get access. And sure enough, it turns out it is about access because now they're rewarding investors in the Trump coin with a dinner at Mar-a-Lago. So if you're in the top people that have invested in these coins, you can have a dinner with Donald Trump at Mar-a-Lago. Some of those are coming from foreign investors. Some of those are coming from the Middle East. Some of those are coming from like royal families. Some of those are coming from foreign governments. And so those people are eligible to come have influence on the president based on the thing. So here's my question. What is the difference between Trump's sons going to other countries and asking them to invest in this meme coin? And by the way, there's some really shady stuff. I'll do a whole episode on this. I don't want to get too into the weeds on it because it's confusing. And that's sort of my point in a second, is that what's the difference between this? This is Donald Trump's sons going to foreign countries and going to, even domestic people and saying, hey, if you buy this coin, you can get access to the president. And Hunter Biden, not even as explicitly saying, if you pay me $500,000 for this painting of mine, because I'm an artist now, maybe that gets you access to my father, who's the president of the United States, or vice president at the time, depending when the timeline is. We railed on Hunter Biden, and I think justifiably so on the right, because it was so obviously corrupt what was going on with Joe Biden. Maybe not illegal. There's some fine lines there of, if his brother and his son are trading on his name and getting jobs that they would otherwise not get if their last name wasn't Biden, it's clearly for access to Joe Biden. What is the difference here? I seriously want to know. What's the difference? I can't find one. This is even worse though, because Donald, as far as we know, no one's ever found a smoking gun that said any of this money went back to Joe Biden. And frankly, I don't think it matters if any money went back to Joe Biden, because he was still getting what he wanted. His son was still getting rich and doing whatever he wanted to do. And so in some way, Biden still got what he wanted, even if it wasn't monetary, his son was still taken care of. And so to me, that's still corruption, and that's still bribery in some way. Even if he never gave a favor to anyone, it doesn't matter. It looks bad and it shouldn't happen. And I think everyone on the right agreed, and a lot of people on the left agreed that it was gross what Hunter Biden was doing. What is the difference now? But here's where things are getting strange, though, is that this has not made the impact that I think it should on the general public, because it's so hard to understand. No, most people don't understand what meme coins are, including myself. It's like the whole cryptocurrency thing is a little foreign to me. I'm going to know some about it, but I'm not in the weeds on it. And I think because the other excuse that we keep hearing from Republicans is, well, it's just all right there in the open. So he's not doing anything illegal or shady. He's doing it right there in the open. He's being transparent about the grift, as if that makes it better. That's the defense. I mean, that's literally what Speaker of the House Mike Johnson said this week. He was like, I don't really know much about the law and what the president can and can't do, which is such a lame excuse because the Congress is supposed to be the people that keep the president in check. So yes, the Speaker of the House should absolutely know what the president can or can't do, because it is the House's job to impeach the president if he's doing something that is not up to snuff. And so that's a lame excuse, but that's been the excuse on the right, and it's worked for the most part. Every Trump supporter I talk to when I bring this kind of thing up, they go, well, I don't think it's corrupt. He's doing it right out in the open. So it can't be corrupt. It can't be illegal if he's just doing it so in the open. So then we get this plane story, and I think it's made a bigger impact because it's simpler to understand. And the whole story is this. Qatar, which is a country in the Middle East that we have a complicated relationship with, I would say. They certainly play both sides of the war on terror because they support Iranian proxies. They supported the 9/11 terrorists. They literally gave a Hunter Biden-like Burisma job to the guy that planned the 9/11. It was like a waterboard job. No, wait, not water. That's actually kind of funny. Not the waterboarding that the CIA did to those terrorists, but like a water, like the water maintenance board or something. And it wasn't a real job. It was a way to pay him while he was planning to blow up the Twin Towers. So, this is not a country that's like our friend necessarily. It's the place where the Hamas leaders have been hiding out. It's who we have to use to negotiate with these terrorist proxies. It's who like any kind of deals that's been going on between Israel and Hezbollah or Hamas has been going through Qatar. So they're not really our friends, but we have military bases there. But I mean, they're shady. They're absolutely shady. Trump's over in the Middle East, doing his Middle East thing. they were like, we want to give you this 747 because we know that your new Air Force One has been delayed by Boeing. It looks like it won't happen until 2027, maybe 2029. They're framing it as a gift to the Department of Defense, but Trump would get it when he leaves office. It would go to his presidential library. And the way that they're trying to say that this is not illegal is they're saying, well, it's a gift to the country and the Department of Defense will take it, and then it will go to the library like any other kind of gift would go to the presidential library. And Ronald Reagan has an Air Force One in his library. Here's the difference, though. That plane that's in the Ronald Reagan library was decommissioned in 2021. Or sorry, not 2021, 2001. So it was used by Reagan and then Bush and then Clinton and then George W. Bush. And then it was decommissioned because it was a 30-year-old plane or whatever. And then it went into Reagan's library. This plane that we'd be getting from Qatar is like a 13-year-old plane. It has, a lot more years after Donald Trump's done with it. And so why does it need to go to his library immediately? Why would you not continue to use the plane? Because everyone knows what the real end game here is, that Donald Trump wants to use that plane once he's not the president anymore. It's also this interesting thing because Donald Trump's still throwing around the I'm going to run for a third term thing, which is, I don't know, ridiculous. But so that's the whole story, is essentially we want to give you this plane because you don't have your new Air Force One yet. We want to give this as a gift. And Donald Trump's like, why would I not take it? What idiot would not take a free gift of $400 million that you don't have to pay for, America? This is a great deal. We'll use that until the Boeing one comes out, and then I'll use this plane. Okay. What's wrong with this question? There's a lot wrong. First, it's a $400 million gift from a foreign government that funds terrorism. This is not complicated. There's a huge conflict of interest here too, because Pam Bondi, his attorney general, was registered as a foreign agent for Qatar, as basically a foreign lobbyist. She got paid $115,000 a month by Qatar when she was doing that. And she's the one that has signed off on this. Yeah, it's totally legal and above board. They've not explained how it's legal or above board because the Constitution says government officials cannot, like congressman, president, no, they cannot take gifts from foreign governments. And we have this whole system set up. I'll link to an article by Jim Garrity at National Review where he explains how all this works and some interesting examples of like watches that are given to CIA people that they didn't have to destroy because they can't take the risk of it being a bug in it or some sort of thing. So they're like destroying these like Rolexes and things because that's what the government has to do. Some things go into the presidential library. Some things go to the National Archives. People do have the option to buy those things that they're given as a gift at fair market value, which sometimes people do. I think there was some examples in that article of Jill Biden, like someone gave her a brooch kind of jewelry thing and she bought it. It was like several $1,000s. So we've got this whole system in place for this. And the Constitution says that, these people cannot accept gifts from foreign governments. And it's plain as day. And yet Pam Bondi signs off. That's totally legal. It's fine. So I don't like taking any gift from a country that funds terrorism. Any gift, especially a $400 million one. Second problem. The second problem was the Constitution's foreign gift clause. The third problem is that the national security aspect of this, it's not just a $400 million gift. It's a plane that the president of the United States is going to fly around on. That is not okay to accept probably from any foreign government, but definitely not someone that is as shady as Qatar and is playing both sides of Iran and us. And so you'd have to, the logistics of this, there's a political article that has sort of laid out what this would cost. And it would be tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions of dollars to take the plane apart, retrofit it for all the security stuff we needed, because we need all sorts of countermeasures and secure communications. And like Air Force One is basically a flying fortress, and it's a place where the president can do everything he needs to be able to do as the president, and needs to have all sorts of security stuff that we don't even know about. And so you'd have to take this whole plane apart if they gifted it to us anyway. We'd have to go through every wire. We'd have to rebuild it, basically take it all apart, rebuild it, make sure there's nothing that they're spying on us with it. There's no sort of way that they can sabotage it. We'd have to go through the whole thing. It would cost hundreds of millions of dollars. It would take forever too. It would take, years to get through. So practically it's not going to be free. So that's another reason I have a problem with it. But even without all of that stuff, I think that the country that funds terrorism and violating the Constitution and the security problem, those are three enough. Forget the cost part. I mean, it will cost us. It's not a free plane. There's no way it is. But the reactions to this have actually been more normal for this. Like, it's such a clear bribe. And I think the reason this is landing better than the meme coin stuff is because people understand it. Like, there's nothing hard to understand here. Country A, that's a funder of terrorism in the Middle East, is giving the president of the United States a plane that he's going to fly around on, and then that guy's going to keep that plane when he leaves office. By the way, Donald Trump is spending billions of dollars to build a golf course in Qatar. The guy that he's getting this plane from, they've known each other for a long time. They've hung out at Mar-a-Lago. So there's already this relationship there that I don't trust. And I don't love that that Donald Trump loves to flatter these foreign, rulers of these countries that are not democratic. There's a whole discussion here to talk about Donald Trump's Middle East policy, which is better, honestly, than Barack Obama or Joe Biden, for sure. Donald Trump has actually had a surprising number of good Middle East policy in his first term. And, we got the Abraham Accords. I think he's been more right than wrong when it comes to the Middle East for some reason. I don't know why that is. I don't know if it's because he cares less about it and he hires good people to do it. And I don't know, Marco Rubio's in his ear going, this is what we should do. And he listens to him. I don't know if that's it. I don't know if he's gotten lucky. I don't know if he just actually knows what he's doing. I don't know, but he has done better in the Middle East than I would have thought he would have before his first term. The Abraham Accords were a big deal. Killing of the Iranian general Soleimani was a big deal. These were good. The way he's handled, for the most part, like hammering the Houthis in Yemen has been the right thing. This week he announced that they're going to dial back sanctions on Syria, who, they forced out Bashar al-Assad. Don't necessarily totally trust this guy that's in charge now, the new regime. He used to be part of bin Laden's crew. So I don't, it's tricky with the Middle East. It's sort of enemy of my enemy is my friend. It's very, very complicated. And I'm not a Middle East expert, but I think for the most part, when, the Syria thing, I go, okay, well, maybe it's worth a try to say, let's get Syria in another country in the Middle East. And part of the deal with Syria is like the recension of some of these sanctions would be on account of them joining the Abraham Accord. So you'd have another Middle East country saying, like, recognizing Israel as a country. And, if we get more and more of those, that's part of the reason they think October 7th happened, is because Iran was pissed about Saudi Arabia talking about joining the Abraham Accords and normalizing relations with Israel. And so if we can get more countries on the like pro-democracy Western kind of stuff, like that's a good thing in the Middle East. And Donald Trump's done more of that than Barack Obama or Joe Biden did, for sure. And honestly, even like George W. Bush. I mean, you can talk about Iraq and Afghanistan and those messes. But the point of all of this being, I still would not accept a plane from one of these people. And so there's been some vocal backlash on this stuff because people like Ben Shapiro, the woman from the Free Press, who I forget her name, that is very pro-Trump. She claims she's a MAGA lefty, all in on Donald Trump, defends him all the time. I really cannot stand the sycophant. But even she came out and said, this is so clearly a bribe. It's ridiculous. Laura Loomer, crazy conspiracy theory Laura Loomer, who has Donald Trump's ear and, is a nut, came out and said, this is a bribe. This is a terrible idea. Nick Catoggio at the Dispatch has a really good point, though. He thinks that it's less about that this is such an obvious bribe and these specific people that have spoken out, two of those people I just mentioned are Jewish. It's more about who the bribe is coming from that they have a problem. It's not so much that Donald Trump accepting a bribe is a problem for them. It's that they don't like Donald Trump accepting a bribe from people that want to destroy Israel. And so it's complicated. But either way, this has gotten more vocal pushback from the right than I would have expected, because I think it's so obvious. And I think people go, this is pretty obviously a bribe. Like, we don't have to explain the details of how a meme coin works. We don't have to get into that kind of stuff. So I think there's some hypocrisy there, because to me, the crypto stuff is worse because there's not really transparency there. We don't really know who has access. Donald Trump is making money no matter what. And for the most part, he's rigged it in a way where a select group of people are making a bunch of money on that, but most people have lost money. Something like 700,000 people have lost money on the meme coin, while a few people have made millions or billions of dollars. And, talk about something that has insider trading capability. Donald Trump is the head of the executive branch and shut down the cryptocurrency sort of policing unit inside the executive branch. So there's all sorts of weird corruption there, but you've got to really diagram it out. You've got to have a thing and have the little red strings going here and there. And it's a lot more complicated for people to understand. And this plane is not complicated for people to understand. So, I don't think this is going to happen. And I normally would not maybe even bring it up, because I think it's going to be one of those things that someone will find a way to shoot this down. It'll be, Congress or someone will say, oh, you can't do this. And Donald Trump will go, oh, well, I wanted that plane and the Democrats thwarted me, or whoever thwarted him, some agency or whatever. I think that's a bad look regardless. But I don't think it'll happen. I do not think Donald Trump's going to be flying around on a Qatari Air Force One. But the fact that he even considered it should tell you something about his judgment. And my question to you, or my question that you should ask your Trump supporting friends, would be like, would you be okay with any of this if Joe Biden did it? Just like take away that Donald Trump's the president. Would you be okay with any other president accepting a plane from a country in the Middle East that funds terrorism? I think the answer would be an obvious no. That would be a bad idea. So again, it goes to Donald Trump's judgment. I think he likes the shiny plane. I think he wants the new plane. He's pissed at Boeing. Some people are going to say, oh, this is just a negotiation tactic to get Boeing to like light a fire under them and get him his new Air Force One. Maybe, but I don't love it. I would rather him light a fire under Boeing in some other way. Boeing certainly needs to shape up, but this is not the way to do it. So this is a bad idea. Donald Trump is okay with really, really bad ideas. And my concern is that the plane is such an obvious one. There's so much stuff like this happening that is just not hitting people's radars. So I pay attention as you see this kind of stuff, because I think what we are, I think the problem is that the left has some responsibility here, in the sense that they claimed over and over again that in his first term that this kind of stuff was going on. And I don't think there was as much evidence that it was happening in his first term. There was certainly some grift stuff. There's always some grift stuff with politicians. But to me, this is no different than Bob Menendez, the senator, accepting gold bars from Turkey. There's not really a difference here. And that guy got convicted of bribery charges. And I don't think this would be a lot different. Just because it's happening in front of us doesn't mean it's not bribery. And I think for the most part, if you're not paying attention, Donald Trump cares about Donald Trump and no one else. This is not about the American people getting a plane for the president. This is about he's the president, he wants a new plane, and when he's done being the president, he wants to be able to keep that plane for himself. This is about enriching himself. The meme coin stuff is about enriching himself and his family. Everything Donald Trump is about Donald Trump only. It is not about you. It is not about America. It is not about making America rich. It is about making him or his friends rich. And I don't even really think he cares that much about his friends. I think it's mostly like, if he doesn't get something out of it, he's not interested in doing it. And if you can point to something where Donald Trump selflessly did something when it comes to money, or when it comes to any sort of policy where he doesn't either monetarily benefits or he benefits from the sort of praise he's going to get for it. I think Donald Trump desperately wants people's approval, specific people's approval. He wants the elite's approval, and he can't get that. And I think that bothers him. I think he loves having his base support, but frankly, he cares less about those people than he cares about billionaires, because billionaires are who he thinks of as his peers, and he wants to be accepted by his peers. And that's why he loves people that come back to him from they previously opposed him, and then now they're saying he's great. He loves that more than a really loyal supporter. He loves someone that is a convert. And I think that's because he either wants the praise or he wants the money. And maybe that's unfair for me to speculate like that. But I mean, this is just such an obvious grift, this plane situation. And for him to not be able to see any of the things that are wrong with it, all he can see is, I get a plane. And he doesn't see the national security risk. He does not see even the risk to his own life, potentially, if Qatar is trying to do something nefarious here. He doesn't care about that it's from a country that is supporting terrorism. He doesn't care that it's a country that's supporting the group of people that he claims he would hammer. Like, if you really wanted to destroy Hamas, put pressure on Qatar to not support Hamas. Like, that's really what you could do if you really want to change things. And Donald Trump felt this way a few years ago. He said awful things about Qatar. He's like, they're untrustworthy, all this kind of stuff. So he's even going back on his own thing, because all they had to do was put a shiny thing in front of him that said, here's this gift we'll give you. All they had to do was flatter him. All you had to do is give him a $400 million plane. That is a huge problem when we're letting this one guy control tariffs. We're letting him dictate how the federal government operates. We're letting him fire people depending on if they agree with him or not, or if they're loyal to him or not. Like, this is a problem that we have one guy that's so easily distracted by something that's shiny. And I think that's a huge problem. And I think that's the same thing with China. It's really, some people convinced him that this would be bad for him, and that's why he paused the tariffs. We should not want a president that makes decisions based on something being good or bad for him. We need a president that makes decisions based on what's good or bad for the country. And I realize there's a lot of MAGA people that are going to disagree with you. They think he does have the country's best interest. And I just disagree with that. And I don't think there's evidence that that's the case. I'm not saying there's not some policies that I agree with on him, but I think it's, for the most part, everything's through the lens of, how does this help Donald Trump? And I think it's a bad way to go. And I don't trust it. So, we're only like 100 and something days into this, and we've got sort of these crazy bribes and stuff. So pay attention. I'm going to do a whole episode on the corruption stuff, because I think it's worth paying attention to. So anyway, I think that's it for me today. Thank you for joining me. If you can do one thing for me, rate the podcast wherever you listen to it. It helps me a lot. Helps me grow this show. And if you could do that for me, that'd be great. You can literally just give it 5 stars on Apple or Spotify or wherever you listen. You don't even have to write something nice if you don't want to, because who likes having to type out a couple paragraphs or even a sentence? That's boring. Just give the stars. That's all I need. Just give me the stars. And that's it for me. I will catch you next time.